Now, every year, thousands of tourists flock to Chile's Easter Island for a glimpse of its mysterious sculptures built hundreds of years ago. But this vital source of income for the tiny Polynesian island is now threatening its very existence. Easter Island has become a living example of what can happen to a civilization when deforestation gets out of control. Al Jazeera's Lucia Newman has this report from the island.
Easter Island's majestic moais stare onto the barren landscape before them as though lamenting what they see. The Polynesian island in the southeastern Pacific Ocean was first believed to have been inhabited 1,700 years ago. Wherever you look, the hills are bare, the earth is eroded, the soil cover so thin in many places that nothing can stop it from being washed into the ocean during heavy rain. Tuhira Tuki, who was involved in resource management, says it all began when her ancestors started building the moais.
We know that when our first king, Hotu Amatua, arrived on the island, it was covered with trees. A lot of the resources of wood were used to transport these moais from the centers, where they were carved in Ranu Raraku, which is 10 to 15 kilometers away from here. They were rolled on logs.
Rival clans competed to build bigger and bigger moais, which represent ancestor worship, cutting and burning more and more trees.
My ancestors began wars to compete for scarce resources. There were too many people for too few resources. The wars lasted at least 100 years, and the land was further degraded.
Disease, famine, and invasions by Peruvian slave traders followed. By the time Chile annexed Easter Island in 1888, there were only 111 islanders left. Then at the beginning of the 1900s, Chile agreed to rent practically this entire island to a British wool company. This is what's left of the sheds where the sheep were sheared. As many as 60,000 sheep were here on this island, eating the grass and degrading the soil. Today, there are no more sheep. But there are more horses than humans. And cattle, too, overgrazing on the island's fragile soil cover. Tourism, the island's only industry, is generating tons of rubbish, which is mainly disposed of like this. Easter Island, which is once again becoming overpopulated, cannot provide enough sustenance for its inhabitants. One reason, says this expert, is the insistence on using inappropriate agricultural methods.
The
land is left naked with no rocks to help hold it down, which used to be the traditional method. So when the strong rains come, the earth moves towards the ocean. It literally drops off the cliff.
Anthropologists and ecologists insist the lessons learned from the collapse of Easter Island's ecosystem should serve as a warning to the rest of the world about the consequences of abuse of natural resources. Lessons that aren't being taken seriously, even here, even now. Lucia Newman, Al Jazeera, Easter Island.
Pablo García, Chevesich, is considered one of the foremost experts on soil erosion and joins us now from Tucson, Arizona, for more on the effects of desertification. The abuse, as we heard there in that report, of the land and its resources has been going on for a very, very long time. Why hasn't the problem then been taken more seriously?
Well, there's been a problem of an extensive use of the land, and so that the soil just erodes, and it's a process that is irreversible. So what we're trying to do is to reverse the problem. That's basically it.
Is it reversible, though?
Oh yeah, it is reversible.
How can that be done? How do you envisage doing that? I know you're going there in a few weeks.
Yeah. Basically, there are three principles that need to be accomplished in order to bring back the productivity of the island's soil. And number one is you maximize the water that infiltrates into the soil. Number two, you decrease the velocity of the water that leaves, that flows on top of the surface of the soil, which is the responsible of the erosion process. And number three, you protect the soil against the impact of the raindrops and the effects of the wind and the sun on evaporating the water. So right now, the current situation is you have an island that is steep, so the rainwater comes and very little infiltrates. Most of it runs off, taking this tremendous amount of soil. And then the sun comes out, and whatever water infiltrates evaporates pretty fast, so nothing can grow there.
But what are the most pressing problems, though, that have led to this kind of quick erosion? Do they have to do with the current practices of land management, the overgrazing that goes on? What is the most pressing issue that you see?
Okay, well, that started 800 years ago when they cut the forest. The soil was basically exposed to the mercy of the climate, and the animals, the overgrazing, didn't help either. So that's the two combinations. Once you have the soil exposed, it will erode forever. So what we're trying to do now is we're going to decrease the slope of the island. So we're going to have a system of terracing, so the water doesn't have any other place to go but infiltrating, and we can finally produce something after 800 years of desertification.
A huge challenge, but how unique and isolated is the situation that we find in Easter Island? How emblematic is it of the wider scenarios that are played out in the region?
Well, this is a very important lesson for a planetary scale, because we are basically following the same pattern that the ancient civilization did. Every year in the world, every year an area the size of Indiana is lost forever because of the same process and an appropriate management of natural resources. So if we can prove that the process in the island is reversible, then we can start reversing the process in the planet too. So the island will be a good beginning.
Pablo García, Chevesich, thanks very much for joining us there from Arizona.
Thank you very much.
And sharing your thoughts on this. Now, environmentalists have held a protest in Cambodia to highlight the effects of climate change. About 100 people